Hey, welcome back. So I have a brand new video for you today. So today I will talk about a few pieces of camera gear that I own that I could have bought earlier. So I'm a big supporter of buying camera gear that is needed or essential for your photography, opposed to just buying something that is hyped in the community. To be honest, I have a lot of gear myself that I collected over the years, and today I will talk about a selected few that is essential for my photography and also street photography kit. Alright, let's take a look. The first item I will talk about is my full frame camera. I have the Sony a7C that I bought back in 2021. Prior to that, I had the crop sensor. I had the Canon 800D that I compared with a pancake lens 24mm, and I had it for many years, and I also practiced a lot on it. And the number one reason I bought a full frame camera is that I was getting serious with photography in general, but also street photography. And some of the other reasons why I bought a full frame camera is that you get a larger sensor compared to a crop sensor. You get more info and detail in the raw files and can capture more details. And you have a larger field of view, and you have a narrower depth of field. So that means that the background will be more blurry compared to a crop sensor. So you will get that nice bokeh if you also paired it with a fast lens. Another reason is that full frame cameras also perform better in low light situations, and back then I was really getting into night street photography, so that really made sense to me. And I do like my prime lenses, and I also like really fast lenses as well, so it seemed like a good option for me to go that route. Another reason why I bought the full frame camera is that I wanted the option of printing out my photos, and when printing out, you want as much detail as you can get in your photos. And I shoot raw. That means that I will retain a lot of information and detail in my photos to work with. And I also do a lot of cropping in my photos afterwards, especially when you're out doing street photography. I like to look at different angles and perspectives, and I can do that in post-production. So the larger the sensor is, the more detail and information it will capture and also pack in the raw file. So those are the reasons I bought a full frame camera. Of course, there are some downsides to owning a full frame camera. There's nothing wrong with a crop sensor, let me just say that up front. I still have a crop sensor camera that I recently bought, which is even older than my Sony a7C, which is almost 3 years old now. With that said, there are a few downsides with full frame cameras. And a few of them is that there is a large barrier to entry, which means that getting a full frame camera is very expensive, and it's more expensive than crop cameras. And you are really making an investment when you're buying and committing to your photography when you're buying a full frame camera. And of course, as I mentioned before, with a full frame camera, your file sizes will be larger, especially if you shoot raw and maybe also uncompressed. The file sizes are bigger. The Sony a7C is only 24 megapixel, but the cameras nowadays, they can take photos of 60 megapixel, which means the file sizes are huge. So that's a trade-off you have to think about if you're willing to make. So these are some of the reasons why I decided to buy a full frame camera. Alright, up next are my two favorite lenses that are essential part of my street photography kit. So I have the 85 and I have the 55mm. So I'll start with the 85 first, and basically this lens is a lens that I bought right after I bought my Sony a7C, and I bought it with a 35mm. And the number one reason I bought this lens is because I was really starting to understand the type of street photography I like to do, and I've been doing that for a few years. So I only had a 35, and sometimes I felt a little bit limited, and I came about this lens and this focal length because it was a little bit hyped at the moment in the community. A lot of street photographers were using this focal length, which is not a typical focal length for street photography, and the results were really nice, and it really resonated with me in terms of the type of street photography I like to do. I don't like to be very close to my subjects, and with this focal length I can actually stand at a corner and take a decent photo from a little bit further away. And also it's not that big if you look at it, and it certainly doesn't look like a telephoto. So that was the number one reason why I bought it. And this is a very versatile lens. Obviously I use it mostly for street photography, but I also use it for portraits, and I also use it for detail shots. So it's super versatile. Just be mindful that this focal length is not for everybody because it is that much longer. And if you're only used to a 35 or a 50, this is a little bit different. So I highly recommend to try it out before you buy it. And the next lens that I mentioned before is the Sony size 55mm and this is my latest addition to my street photography kit. I really love the 50mm focal length, and when I had my Canon 800D, I had a pancake lens that was 24mm, and if you factor in the crop factor, it actually come close to the 50mm. So I already knew in back of my head that I love this focal length, and I just didn't know about this lens. And I started to do some research on it. It's actually quite an old lens. It was released back in 2013. It's some of the selling points for me was that it's a Zeiss lens. It's super sharp. It's very small. It's very lightweight, and especially when I combine it with or pair it with my Sony A7C, the footprint of that setup is very small. So, and as I mentioned before, pictures on this thing are super sharp, and some of my best pictures that I've taken has been with this lens, in my own opinion. And yeah, so it is my go-to lens, more than my 35 and 85. I would say that 85 is a close competitor to the 55. And I recently made a video on the 35mm, which is a classic focal length, and you can check it out in the playlist. Alright, up next is my two favorite filters, and the first one is the Peter McKinnon Polar Pro VND, and this is the Signature Edition Mark II. And this is also the 82mm, which is the largest one they have. And I compare them with I have a couple of step-up rings because I have multiple lenses. And this way I don't need to buy a dedicated filter for each lens. And the number one reason I bought this filter is that I like to do street photography during the day, but also I like to do street photography at a wider aperture. So basically 1.4, 1.8 or 2.8. And I like that nice bokeh and blurry background. And for that, sometimes you need a good filter. And this is a variable, so it has 2 to 5 stop. And basically a VND will cut out the light with the amount of stop that it has. So basically it's like sunglasses for your lens. Super essential for any street photographer. The next filter I have that is also an essential part of my street photography kit is the Nissi Black Pro Mist Filter. I have it in 1/8 strength. They come in different strengths, and it's just about figuring out what you like. But basically the Black Pro Mist Filter reduces the highlights and the overall contrast of a photo. So think film photography. It adds a softer look to your photographs and also adds this dreamy, hazy look, which I really like. I use it mostly for night street photography, and it's really good for filming yourself. That's why it's on my lens right now. It smooths out the skin. So I'm really happy about that purchase as well. The next two pieces of camera gear that I have is very essential for my street photography kit, and it's also from a practical perspective. I have my camera straps, and I've had a few over the years. These are the Peak Design Slide Light. I bought it I think also last year, and it's specifically made for mirrorless cameras that are a little bit lighter than DSLRs. And I'm very happy that I bought this camera strap. And for me, the number one reason is that I want to keep my camera secure, especially when I'm out and about and there's a lot of people, and there's always a danger of you can drop your camera, it can get stolen. And with this, I feel very secure of having my camera by the side. So that's the one strap I have. And I recently bought another Peak Design cuff. Basically, it's a cuff you put on your wrist, and it keeps your camera really secure, and especially if it's a camera that doesn't have a great ergonomics like the Sony A7C and the other camera that I also have. And also a reason why I bought it was that I was out doing a POV the other day. I was walking down a very busy place here in Copenhagen with a lot of people and a lot of tourists, and I was playing around with my phone. I was not really paying attention to the surroundings around me. And I kind of noticed somebody walking really close to me. And at that time, I didn't have my other camera strap on, so it wasn't really secure, other than I just had it in my hand, which I normally never do. But I had my GoPro on, so it was just a lot of camera straps and a lot of coordination. But I noticed that this guy was actually walking behind me, and I suddenly moved around, and he just moved direction and went away, and I'm pretty sure that he was about to steal my camera. So I ran down to the retailer and I bought this cuff, and I really like it because sometimes I don't want to wear my camera strap, the bigger one. I can just securely have my camera on my wrist, and there's no risk of dropping it or getting stolen. So I think those are really essential for any street photographer as well. Before I wrap up this video, I have an honorable mention. I have these AirPods Pro, which is really an essential part of my street photography kit, and I use them every time I go out and do street photography. I really like to cut out any noise from traffic or my surroundings, and they are also, because they are noise cancelling, I can do that. And normally I just like to listen to podcast or some music, and it really helps me to focus on my photography and really get me in the zone. And I know there's a little bit difference of opinion in the community about using music versus having music in your ears. This is a personal preference and it really works well for me. So I just wanted to mention that here. Let me wrap up this video with a few final thoughts. The majority of the camera gear that I showed you that are part of my essential street kit, I think they're bought at the right time. And there might be a few items that I could have bought earlier or sooner, but I think that stems from me also understanding the type of street photography I like and really understanding what my needs were. And having that understanding now, it is much easier for me to determine what is essential for me and the type of street photography I do compared to non-essential. So I hope you got some inspiration out of this video. Take care. See you in the next one.